The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
The following program is closed captioned for the thinking impaired.
By tomorrow, I will rule the world!
You think he's gone? He's not gone. That's the whole point. He's never gone!
Is this some radical new therapy?
You see?
Well, I must have not been paying attention.
Well, we can
we're
always,
here.
could always
With
just
us.
start
There's
over,
lots
I
of music
guess.
there, I guess. I mean, we're already on. That was an interesting thing. I can just do this again.
The following was recorded in front of a live studio
Oh, camera.
audience
Did we
at the
start over
Studio
or no?
21
We're just
Podcast
gonna go with
Cafe.
Yeah.
This is the United
reel.
Podcast
Blooper
Network.
reel.
The following program is closed captioned for the
Wait, you want me to
thinking
go again?
impaired.
By tomorrow, I will rule
Nobody
the
watches the
world!
show anyway, so what does it matter?
Deal.
Although those ratings are pretty good.
He's never
Ratings
gone!
are pretty
Is
good.
this some radical
We just
new
missed. They got to
therapy?
see the video. Now they get to hear the music for longer.
Press any key.
Oh.
Where's the any key?
I would prefer to have more listeners than viewers.
Welcome. You
What?
got mail.
Is this an old intro?
Oh, it is?
Well, I must have not been paying attention.
Oh, there was the any key, right?
Yeah.
No kidding.
When you were
I have to go back and listen to that. It was only half.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Do you think that
See that? It's like it never happened.
Right?
And I listen more
Nobody cares anyway.
You guys, it's really hot outside.
The one thing my enemies are right about is that no one gives a shit.
in all of that.
They do. Don't say that.
I could come on here.
I've seen your numbers. They do. So
Listen,
don't you even tell
I didn't
me.
even come in one day. We did a show without me here. It was just an empty desk for 40 straight minutes with the ads circulating in the front. And my viewership was higher than when I'm here.
I can debunk that whole thing for you if you want to get into it over the show. You didn't. Those people didn't stay and watch your entire show. Those people clicked because it was a very interesting thumbnail.
Yeah, it was clickbait,
And they,
sure.
yeah. So you got a lot of views, but I don't think anyone hung out and watched 45 minutes of nothing.
Although some did. That was pretty funny because I was watching at home.
Oh, when
I was
we
in
were
bed. I was
live.
watching at home. Like Randy Curtis, right through the whole thing. There's a whole bunch of
When
people.
we were originally live, yeah,
Yeah.
people I think were wondering whether or not you were coming on.
Ah, shit. I had a dream about Mel the other night. It's kind of weird.
Oh, Mel.
The one thing you don't ever want is to hear me sing. I had a dream the other day that Mel called me up to sing with him. And it was as bad as it would have been in real life. I don't know. What do you think? Should we just get this show on the road or what?
I mean, I love listening to Mel, but I love listening to you. That's like Sophie's choice over
I
here.
bet if we took a poll, they'd probably rather hear Mel than hear me.
I mean, I am a musician. I do like music.
Some night I'll come to one of your events and I'll sing. How's that?
I would love
I'll
you
do like a
to.
karaoke thing.
Yeah.
By the way, I hate karaoke. I won't even go somewhere and sit in the back and have dinner if there's
Yeah.
karaoke going on. No. In fact, if I'm out at a bar and karaoke like breaks out,
Yeah.
like all of a sudden they go, 7 o'clock, it's time for karaoke.
You're like,
we
bye.
leave.
Yeah. That's not for everyone.
All right, let's get this show on the road. Hi, how you guys doing? My name's Tom Duggan. You're Paying Attention Podcast. Hi atop. Two guys smoke shop at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. We're going to talk a little bit about our Massachusetts state legislature today. You know, they're just such a joke, and I know some of them are my friends. Although I really should amend that and say some of them pretend to be my friends. Because at the end of the day, when I need something, the phone's not ringing for most of them. There's a couple. Estella Reyes is wonderful. But for the rest of them, not so much. When it all comes down to it, not really. Only when they need something. At election time, they're all my friends, though. At election time, we should invite Tom out for dinner with us. Make him part of the crew. Yep. And then when it's not election time, not so much. Before I start, I want to give a free shout out to Finicaro Tax Service in Methuen. A little late doing my taxes this year, and I know people are like, why do you talk about your taxes? I really don't care. I'm a little late doing my taxes this year because I kind of got a little behind with COVID, and so my filings are a little late. And I went to Francesco and Molly over at Finicaro Tax Service, and immediately they got on the phone with the Department of Revenue and started working out stuff and started getting stuff abated. And so I want to thank them for all the hard work they did today. I think they did about 3 hours worth of work, and I only paid them for one. So a free shout out to, by the way, I got them because of Dave Id Consoli at Pleasant Valley Landscaping, one of our advertisers, one of our sponsors of here in the show. We were talking after the show, and I said, geez, I need another tax accountant. The one that I have is kind of like leaving the business. And he said, no, you got to go to Finicaro. They do mine, and they're great. And whenever there's a problem, they call me right away. So that's how I ended up getting Francesco and Molly. So thank you also to Dave Id Consoli. And by the way, a shout out to Michael Consoli, who had surgery the other day, I guess on his shoulder. Dave Id Consoli at Pleasant Valley Landscaping is looking for help. Because he and his son actually went out and were doing a job and a wall fell on them, and they're both still trying to recover from that. And his son Michael had surgery, I think it was yesterday or the day before, maybe a couple of days ago. My days all run together. So a free shout out to them. Also a free shout out to Paul Lambert, my good friend Paul Lambert, the attorney. He does like family law stuff, wills and trusts and things like that. If you're looking to do like a will or a healthcare proxy or any kind of stuff like that, you want to give him a call. Let's see. I have Hamilton down here, and I don't know why. Okay, that'll be for later. Another free shout-out to our good friend, Marilyn Lariano at Enterprise Bank in Lawrence. She is featured in this edition of the Valley Patriot, which is on the streets right now, is being delivered as we speak. The July edition is out. Not the front page I was hoping for. We're still waiting to hear from the court, but as soon as we do, hopefully that'll be a good front page story for next month. But Marilyn Lariano is in the middle pages. She is one of the team members at Enterprise Bank in Lawrence. She's such a wonderful person. And she just passed her test to be a United States citizen. So welcome to America. People think that because I'm against illegal immigration that I'm against immigration, because that's what political idiots say to try and stop you when you're against illegal immigration, try and make you seem like you're a bad person. But I'm actually all for legal immigration, and Marilyn did it right, and she took the test, and she worked hard, and now she's going to be an American citizen. I think they're going to swear her in sometime in the next month or so. And if I've got the time, I'm actually going to go to that if I can and take a picture and put her in the Valley Patriot when she gets sworn in to be an American citizen. I'm so proud of her. I am proud of anybody who goes through the process legally to become an American citizen while millions of people don't give a shit about our country and are streaming across the border and just doing what they want to do. And especially in this environment where people who are from other countries see other people breaking the rules and cutting the line, and they're still willing to stand in line and do it right. I have a lot of admiration for people who do that. Also, one more thing before we get into our topics today, two more things. Tonight on North Andover Cable Access at 7 o'clock, and then again next Thursday at 7 o'clock on North Andover Cable Access, an American hero, American patriot, Mike Sapupo, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, Sapupo, who was instrumental. He worked for NASA. He was instrumental in the moon landing. And there are 3 documentaries that are about him that he's put together. And one of them, I think, part 1, I think, aired last night. Part 2 is going to air tonight at 7. And then I think the third one's going to air next Thursday night at 7. And if you go to North Andover Cam, I think it's NCAM. You'd have to go like the North Andover Town of North Andover website and go to the NCAM, see where the NCAM link is, and find it. If I think of it later on, I'll post it on my Facebook page. But a free shout out to him. We have a local hero, and I always think that's kind of cool. And he's also, I got an email from his grandson, a big fan. Oh, thank you, my love. Also has a grandson who notified me that he's a big fan of the Valley Patriot. So anytime like a hero veteran or somebody who's done like something heroic, or somebody who's like significantly part of history is a fan of the Valley Patriot, I always try and go above and beyond to try and give them a free shout out. Okay, a couple things I want to get to. The first thing is it's re-election time. Now the rest of you are all at the beach. You're at the lake. You're traveling. You're on vacation. You're thinking about your summer. You're not thinking about election time. The election's in November, Tom. What are you talking about the elections for? It's in November. It's, for crying out loud, it's July. Well, guess what? The primary elections are in September. So if you don't pay attention to the primary elections, you really have almost no say when the final elections come rolling around, because we all know that in Massachusetts, the Democrat always wins. Like, with very few exceptions. Like, people say, oh, well, Charlie Baker, he was a Republican. No, he wasn't. He had an R next to his name, but there was never anything Charlie Baker ever did that was Republican. He ran with an R next to his name, but again was no Republican. And I say that as a guy who liked Charlie Baker and is friends with Charlie Baker. For the most part, and there's always an exception, but the exception doesn't kill the rule. For the most part, 99.9999999% of the time, the Democrat wins. And unless it's a gerrymandered district where a Republican can win, your entire state legislature is dominated by Democrats. Your House is 99% Democrat. Your Senate is like 95% Democrat. From governor all the way down to state treasurer, every single executive office in Massachusetts is a Democrat. Every single one. There's no Republicans, not one. Your state auditor, your state treasurer, your secretary of state, your governor, your lieutenant governor, all of them. Every single one, all the way down. Your governor's counselors, all of them straight down the ticket. They're all Democrats, all of them. So at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter what happens in the November election. In Massachusetts, you really need to pay attention in the primary. Because in the primary, you've usually got a Democrat versus a Democrat. And by the way, 99% of all incumbents get elected. The ones that don't get reelected. And don't email me on this because I've got proof. The few times when an incumbent loses their seat, they don't lose in a final. They lose in a primary. So, for example, Diana Dizoglio ran for state representative back in, I think, 2014. Somewhere around that time, 2013, 2014, like around there. She ran for state representative against the incumbent at the time, David Turisi, who was never going to lose a November election to a Republican in that district. It was just never going to happen. The district included 4 precincts in Lawrence, which always vote 9-1 Democrat. It also had the most Democrat districts in North Andover, and I believe 2 precincts in Methuen that always vote Democrat. So Diana ran as a Democrat against a Democrat in a primary, and she defeated Dave Turisi by an overwhelming number of votes. He even lost like his own home precinct. Had she run as a Republican, she would have got her ass kicked. So if you're going to pay attention to the elections, if you care about your elections, you need to stop paying attention now. Because now, in July and August, is when all of the state reps who have challenges in their primaries start freaking the fuck out. This is when they start knocking on doors. This is when they start calling you and going, listen, I know you might be on vacation, but do you mind if I come by and knock on your door and say hi to you today? Do you mind if I come and care about your concern because now I need your vote? Because in between the elections, they don't give a shit about what you think about anything. They just do what they want. But at election time, they have to at least pretend like they care. So they're either going to call you or they're going to come knock on your door. Or they're going to show up at like the fireworks in North Andover, or they're going to show up at some Methuen Day in October. They'll probably show up to that, looking for people that are walking around with families that look like they might vote and go and try and see if they can get you to vote for them. So why am I bringing all this up? Because it is the beginning of July. I'm bringing all this up because, even with the primaries, it still really doesn't all that much matter. Like, it matters a little bit. Like, when Diana beat Dave Turisi, it mattered because at the time, Diana was campaigning to stop illegal aliens from getting driver's licenses. And Dave, to the surprise of his conservative constituents in North Andover, had voted for it. And people were outraged. So Diana ran against him on that platform. Now, looking back, Diana, the minute she got in, changed her vote and ended up voting for it. So people are still mad about, my friend Duncan Burns is still screaming about that. And he's not wrong about that either. But at the end of the day, if you've got a state rep that you don't like, now's the time to pay attention. There's going to be a big contention in Lawrence. In Lawrence, you're going to have, you're going to have Estella Reyes running for re-election. I don't think she's going to have a problem. I'm going to be working on that campaign in full disclosure. I'm going to be at every single fundraiser, every single door knock. I love Estella Reyes. She's my friend. And unlike other people, she doesn't stab me in the back when I'm not looking. Hint, hint to somebody else. Ryan Hamilton will be up for re-election in Methuen. I don't think he's going to have a hard time. I don't know if anybody is thinking of even running against him. I haven't heard any names. But he seems to be doing okay. I mean, he's a kid, and he's still kind of learning the ropes, but I think he's doing okay. Frank Moran has never had a contested race. I think he's on his, I'm guessing, maybe his 12th, maybe his 11th or 12th term that he's running for. I might be wrong. I might be off by a term. All the petty tyrants, don't email me that my number is wrong because the number's not really important. The point is what's important. He's been there forever. And he's never had a race. He's never had anybody run against him. So he'll be fine. The real contentious race is going to be Francisco Polino, who defeated Marcos Devers 2 years ago. Marcos had been defeated once before in a primary. So that's the other example that I give you of incumbents don't lose in final elections. They lose in primaries. Juana Matias ran against him in a primary, and everybody stayed home thinking, oh, Marcos is going to win. Everybody loves Marcos. And her people came out to vote, and his didn't, and he lost. Then she was so arrogant that after winning, the day after she won state rep, she wasn't even sworn in yet, declared she was going to run for Congress. Like, she thought she was going to be president overnight. Like, she won one election, and that was it. She was ready to head the UN. You know, she was ready to replace Jean-Luc Picard as head of the United Federation of Planets at that point. Like, state rep, that was it. So, anyways, Francisco Polino ran against Marcos after Juana Matias lost for Congress and didn't run for re-election. Marcos got his seat back. And Marcos, by the way, I think kind of learned his lesson from that you don't rest on your laurels, that you get out there and you knock doors even when you think you got it won. So he got back in, and he and Brian DePina, the mayor of Lawrence, did not get along. And I can tell you in full disclosure, I tried several times to try and get Marcos and Brian in a room together because they're both my friends. And it would have been great for me to have Marcos get reelected and have Brian get elected mayor. That would have been awesome. I would have had two of my friends in office, and that, for me, I would have been happy for them. Unfortunately, Brian and Marcos did not get along. I could not even get them in a room. In fact, I think at one point I got them in a room, and it lasted about 4 seconds. I think somebody made a comment. Somebody snarked back, and that was like the end of it. Everybody was out of the room. Francisco Polino was Brian DePina's candidate at the time. Since then, however, Francisco Polino has taken office. He defeated Marcos because of Brian's support, but now it wasn't maybe even a month after Francisco Polino got into office that Brian and Francisco fell apart. And so one of the state reps for Lawrence has 3 state reps, Francisco Polino, Estella Reyes, and Frank Moran. Francisco Polino has fallen in, he's fallen out with the mayor, for lack of a better term. So even though 2 years ago I couldn't get Marcos and Brian in the same freaking room together, because that's how much animosity there was between them, Marcos has declared that he's coming back and he's running for his seat again against Francisco Polino. So you've got a former state rep who's really kind of running as an incumbent because he's been the incumbent for so long, running against the current incumbent who used to be with the mayor, but now the mayor, Brian DePina, is supporting who? He's supporting Marcos. Wow, that's craziness. The alliances in politics are so crazy. The egos are so huge that sometimes these guys don't get along just because one person got a headline and the other person is jealous that the first guy got the headline. Or everybody shows up at a ribbon cutting and somebody forgot to invite so-and-so, and now so-and-so is mad and he's going to screw them in the next election. And really, for the most part, when politicians don't get along, it's usually an ego issue. It's usually, he didn't invite me to his fundraiser, he didn't thank me at the microphone, he had a ribbon cutting and didn't put me in the picture, you didn't list me when he was, thanking people. It's usually something like that. It's usually not something of substance. So Francisco Polino, who, by the way, has got a shit ton of money, which is, I think, what gives him the edge, Francisco's going to have to sing for his supper. Last time around, he didn't really have to work that hard because Brian DePina was so popular that Brian sending out fundraising letters and sending out endorsement letters saying, I'm with Francisco Polino, pretty much pushed him over the top. And I remember saying to Marcos several times during that election, because Marcos is my friend, listen, you've got to get out there and knock on more doors. Tommy, my fling, no, come on, no, people love Marcos. They love Marco Davis. Come on, be. So he kind of took it for granted again, and what happened with Juana Matias happened again. And now he's back in the challenger's seat, and he's going after Francisco Polino. And I'm going to say that Francisco's got the edge on this because Francisco's got a lot more money. And Marcos has kind of almost gone bankrupt running his last several campaigns. Like, he's borrowed money to run those campaigns. And I wish he had more money, and I wish he had the ability to raise more money, but at least in the past, he hasn't been able to. So it's going to be very interesting. The Lawrence state rep race is going to be one of the few races in this primary season in September that everyone's going to have to watch out for and see what happens. Let's take a 30,000-foot view of this, though. And I'm not saying this is nothing bad against Marcos, because I'm going to end up supporting Marcos after what Francisco Polino did with the housing bill. Although I still like him, and I'm still going to put him in my paper, but I can't. After what he did with the housing bill, there's just no way. I don't think I can, especially after he ducked my calls. If he hadn't ducked my calls, I'd probably be still in the middle on this. But the fact is, to the average taxpayer, to the average voter, to the average citizen of Massachusetts, or even just the citizens of Lawrence and Methuen, because it's a Lawrence-Methuen district, does it really matter if Marcos wins or if Francisco Polino wins? No. Does it really matter if Frank Moran has a challenger who beats him or Frank Moran wins? No. And it doesn't matter because whoever wins these state rep races will do whatever the fuck their party tells them to do on every single bill. We came in here and we did a whole show one day on how is it possible that the legislature voted to give free bennies, free housing to illegal aliens over American veterans sleeping on the streets. Remember that show that we did? For those of you who follow every show? We did a whole show on it. And we did a whole show on how is it that reasonably intelligent people who care about their community, people who are state representatives who knock on your door every couple of years, and that you talk to that seem like such nice people, how could those people vote for illegal aliens to get free housing over homeless veterans? And the answer is because they have to do whatever their party tells them to do. If they don't get committee assignments. And if they don't get committee assignments, they don't get to double and triple and quadruple their pay. And we did a whole show on that. And by the way, not one state rep called me and told me I was wrong about that. I was waiting for at least one to call me and go, Tom, maybe you exaggerated that a little bit. And I wasn't even exaggerating even a little bit. So how much do state reps get paid, by the way? Because if it's Democrat versus Democrat, it really doesn't matter. They're going to vote. Francisco Polino is voting exactly the same way Marcos would vote. Marcos voted exactly the same way as Estela Reyes is voting. Estela Reyes is voting exactly the same way Frank Moran is voting. Frank Moran is voting exactly the same way Dave Teresi 8 years ago voted in North Andover. They all vote for whatever their party wants. The real question is, after we talked about that extra $40,000 per committee assignment, you know, their base pay is somewhere in the neighborhood of $70,000, but these guys are taking home upwards of $300,000 and $400,000 because of their committee assignments. The real question is, how much are your state reps getting paid? And that's a question that our state auditor has been fighting very hard on. So Diana Dizoglio is our state auditor. She's from Methuen. She's been on the show a bunch of times. We love Diana. She's going to start with the diversity, equity, inclusion bullshit. But other than that, she's a great state auditor. And she has been trying to audit the legislature since she became the auditor. In other words, how much does your state legislature, how much do your state reps spend on themselves? Like when they go on trips, you pay for that. Wouldn't it be nice if we knew how much they were spending on those trips? How many hot dogs did they buy when they went to Disney World on our dime? Here's the other thing. Diana Dizoglio is rabid about this issue because it goes back to what happened when she was an aide for State Rep Paul Adams back in like 2000, I know I'm going to get the year right, 2012. 2011, 2012, like the end of 2011, beginning of 2012, Diana Dizoglio was the legislative aide for Paul Adams, who was, back then, a Republican from Andover. And she was sexually abused and sexually harassed by state representatives and staffers at the time. And when she complained about it, her Republican moral majority Christian right-wing Republican state rep that she works for fired her for complaining about sexual harassment. So she threatened a lawsuit, and the speaker gave her a big payday, a nice golden parachute, lots of thousands of dollars with lots of zeros, if you leave but don't tell anybody what happened. It's called a non-disclosure agreement. We're going to settle your lawsuit before you file it by giving you a big check, but you have to sign a non-disclosure agreement that you're never going to publicly talk about what state reps grabbed your ass when you were walking through the hallway, what state reps asked you to go to a hotel with them after work, what state reps were fondling your breasts while you were trying to get work done. And when that happened to Diana Dizoglio, I'm very good friends with Diana, she was really upset that they were forcing her to sign it, but she needed the money so bad because they were firing her. She didn't know how long it would be before she'd get another job, so she took the money. And then she said to me, and I remember it clearly, I remember where we were at the time, we were at Salvatore's, she said to me, and I can still picture her saying it, "You know, Tom, I never knew they had a slush fund for such things. If they're offering me this number of thousands of dollars to keep quiet about sexual abuse and sexual harassment, how many other women have worked in the legislature that have been sexually abused and sexually harassed and have been paid off by state reps to keep their mouths shut so they can keep getting reelected and they can keep sexually fondling women's breasts in the State House while they're lecturing the rest of us about how much they care about women?" I remember that conversation very vividly because I believe that was the day she said to me, "You know, I'm thinking about running against Dave Teresi. I want to put a stop to this shit." That was her motivation to even run for office. It wasn't that she was sexually harassed and people were covering it up. It's that she realized there were slush funds that the public didn't know about that were put aside of our tax money so that state reps, lecherous state reps, could fondle women and sexually harass women that worked at the State House who had no power. Legislative aides, secretaries, and that there was our tax money was squirreled away in a fund somewhere that they could use to pay these women off to stay quiet. So she became a state rep and she did away with the non-disclosure agreements. They're now illegal. If you work for the state and you leave, they can't make you sign a non-disclosure agreement anymore. Good for her. It took her 4 terms as a state rep and 2 terms as a state senator to get it done, but she got it done. God bless her. God bless her. Now she's the state auditor, and now she says, you know, now that I'm thinking about it, we got rid of the non-disclosure agreements, but that doesn't fix the problem, really. I think the public should know how much of their tax dollars are sitting in accounts that are slush funds for other types of misdeeds by state reps. Because, you know, people don't just sue the state because of sexual harassment. They sue them for all kinds of things. They're disclosing personal information online, firing them for complaining about something. There's all kinds of things that people would sue if you were a state employee working for the legislature that you might want to sue. So they still have these slush funds, by the way, even though there were non-disclosure agreements. They still have these slush funds. They're still finding ways to work around it. And Diana, as the state auditor, said, no, you know what? We think that the public should know how much of the public's money is being spent on public employees who are working on their behalf. And the legislature flipped the fuck out. And they said, you don't have that. You don't have that right. Well, let me tell you, as the guy who wrote the state's public records law, the very first thing the Speaker of the House did to my bill when I submitted it was exempt the legislature. So you can go to Lawrence City Hall and say, I want to know how much money is the DPW director spending on out-of-state travel, and they have to give you those documents. But you can't go to the legislature and say, I want to know how much State Representative Ramos is spending on out-of-state travel when she goes to Israel on our dime. They won't give you that. You have no right to that because they exempted themselves. So when Diana Dizoglio showed up and said, no, I'm going to audit you, they said, no, you have no right to do that. So she's taking them to court. In the meantime, she's decided to take her case to the public. And she has been working to get signatures for the last 7 or 8 months to get a ballot question on the November ballot so that the public can choose whether or not the public should have access to what their public employees, the state reps and senators, are spending of the public's money. You might notice that I use the word public a whole bunch of times there. Because really, that's what we're talking about. This isn't a private corporation that can spend on whatever they want. These are people that work for you. They're state reps and state senators who work on your behalf. And again, go back to the fact that your state rep gets about $70,000 to $90,000, depending on where you are, as base pay. But if they do what the speaker tells them to do, and they get a committee assignment and they get on the Ways and Means Committee, well, they get to double that base pay. And don't email me that my numbers are wrong, because it doesn't matter if the exact number's right or wrong. The point is still the same. And if they get 3 committee assignments, they get to quadruple their base pay. And then if they get elected among the committee members to be chairman of that committee, well, they get like another 15 or 20,000, even more. So at the end of the day, your state rep tells you they're getting paid $70,000 or $80,000 a year, as if they're doing this for the goodness of the public. Look, I could have been making all kinds of money working in the private sector, but I'm only getting $75,000, $80,000 working for the public. Look what a great public servant I am. But the fact is, they're making quadruple, sometimes 5, 6, 7 times that amount of money. And how do we get to know that? We don't get to know that because they exempted themselves from the state's public records law. You can't get that money. If they go to Israel, if they travel to Mexico, if they travel to Texas, if they go to California, and they go out to eat every night and they submit their restaurant bills, the taxpayers pay for it, but the taxpayers don't get to know what they paid for. So Diana is looking to get this on the ballot. She got the required signatures. The Secretary of State, I'm going to pull it up here in a second because I thought I had it ready, but I guess I don't. The Secretary of State, Bill Galvin, certified the signatures last week. And I believe UMass Amherst, let me make sure I get that right, because all the petty tyrants out there, if you don't get every detail right, they make it look like your point is wrong, even though you just got something slightly wrong on the detail. I call them petty tyrants. Public opinion poll shows on the Dizoglio ballot measure, 67% of the 700 base staters, Massachusetts residents, surveyed by the University of Massachusetts Amherst poll, said that they would vote in favor of the question, and 55% in respondent told WGBH News and Commonwealth magazine on Beacon Hill that the same thing. So the public is for it. The state auditor is for it. But the people who knock on your door and say that they work for you are not for it. Here's what's going to be maddening about all of this. And this is why today's show is very important, even though you're probably on a beach. Hopefully you're going back and you're watching this back in like late August, early September, or even a little later. I used to be the I was the political director for Mass Citizens for Marriage, way back in like 1999, 2000. And my job was to get the gay marriage bill on the ballot so that the public could decide for gay marriage. I got the required, and again, don't hold me to the number, but I got the required, I think it was like 250,000 signatures what we needed. We got way more than what we needed in signatures to get that measure on the ballot. But you know what the legislature did? They refused to take action on it. They passed a law that in order for something to go on the ballot, not only do you have to get the required number of signatures, the legislature has to approve it. In other words, you need to ask your overlords at the legislature, at Beacon Hill, you have to ask them for permission to hold them accountable. So what do you think that the majority Democrat state legislature did back in 2000 to the gay marriage bill that we wanted to put on the ballot? Because I wouldn't care one way or the other. I don't care about gay marriage. If people want to get married, they want to be gay. I don't care if you want to marry your penguin. I couldn't care less. But I really believed that it should be something on the ballot. I think it's something that the public should decide. Each state should decide for themselves. How do you think they voted? You in the yellow car. Nope. They voted no. They voted to stop the public from being able to vote on gay marriage. So even though Secretary of State Galvin has approved the signatures that Diana Dizoglio's team has put forth, and I don't know, it was like 200,000, 300,000. She did a lot of signatures. She spent the last 9 months going from Market Basket to Stop and Shop to get signatures, her and her team. They worked really hard. They did a great job. And even though the Secretary of State has now certified those and said this is now a ballot measure that can go forward, the legislature can still kill it. The people who don't want you to find out what they're spending can still kill it. Here's something even more infuriating for you. If they don't kill it, and it goes on the ballot, and you guys vote for it, let's say it passes 80% to 20%, they still don't have to do it. They can override a ballot measure. That's right. You can vote on anything you want on a ballot question, and it's not binding. The legislature can override it if they want. If they get 2/3 vote, and by the way, this is why you need Republicans, right? This is why you need Republicans in a state like Massachusetts. You don't need a lot of them, but you need some. Because if your legislature is 80% dominated by one party, you'll never get anything you need from them. If you had more Republicans, you might not get a 2/3 vote to stop the ballot measure that you, the voters, supported. So you see what I'm saying when I say, does it really matter whether Frank Moran wins or the guy running against him really wins? It matters if you like Frank Moran, but other than that, it doesn't matter to the average taxpayer. Does it matter if Adrian Ramos wins in North Andover or some other Democrat wins in North Andover? It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, they work for each other. They don't work for you. At the end of the day, they vote the way their colleagues want them to. They don't vote the way you want them to. Because if they vote the way you want them to, they don't get those cushy committee assignments. And they're based, ask Colleen, Gary, and Drake it, who gets almost no committee assignments because she doesn't go along with her party. She's stuck with her base pay, and she's working like extra jobs on the side, even though she's a state representative, while other state representatives are pulling in $300,000 and $400,000 a year to sit in committees. In fact, by the way, most of them don't even go to the committees. They get paid whether they showed up or they don't. So I know it's the beginning of July. A lot of you guys are at the beach. Everybody's enjoying the heat, or you're hiding in air conditioning, and you're not thinking about elections. But you should be. You should be. Does it matter if Marcos Devers wins or Francisco Polino wins? Well, it matters to me because I know these people. And the housing bill was an atrocity, an absolute atrocity. And once we get a ruling from the court, we'll talk about that a lot more. But it was an atrocity for a lot of reasons. But does it really matter to the average taxpayer? It really kind of doesn't. If Ryan Hamilton wins or if Linda Campbell comes back and runs against him, it matters to him. It matters to his political supporters and his friends and family. But to you, it really kind of doesn't. What really matters is what they're all doing behind our back when they're on Beacon Hill, covering each other's asses and telling our state auditor, who actually is working for you, to go pound sand. We're not going to tell you how much we spent on that trip to Texas. We're not going to tell you how many committee assignments we have. We're not going to tell you how much money we're actually making. Screw you and screw the taxpayers. We don't have to answer to you. We only have to answer to each other. So I'm going to leave you with that. I know I didn't talk about our sponsors at the top of the show, so I'll do it now. Oh, what's happened? Okay. I'm getting hand motions. I thought you were waving in planes. I had no idea what was going on over there. I'll pull up my sponsor list. I know we mentioned Pleasant Valley Landscaping Contractors. Dave Idconsoli is looking for workers. Desperately needs landscapers. He's been hurt. His son has been hurt. And we're hoping that Michael gets better. I've said a couple of prayers for Michael. I only met him once. I don't know him that well. I'm not going to pretend. But he seems like a nice kid. And given that he's Dave Idconsoli's son, you know he is probably a really good kid because Dave's a really good guy. Where am I? Here they are. I also want to say free show to JG's Ice Cream on a day like today. That's where you need to be. You'd be listening to me on the podcast and standing in line at JG's Ice Cream to get your ice cream. Pleasant Valley, let's keep going. AFC Urgent Care having lunch with Zaka tomorrow. No more Lisa Williams, I think. I think we're done with Lisa. I think Lisa has left the building. Clear Path for Veterans New England, a real nonprofit that helps real veterans, doesn't take money off the top. Tomo and Shaken Seafood, Borelli's Deli, Timeout Sports Bar in Haverhill, EIS Investigation and Gun Training, Marston and Sun Construction, Zadie Pesci Law Office at Century 21, McLennan Real Estate. Do you have something tonight, honey?
I am. Music 6:30, Music Bingo, Sadie's Bar and Grill here in Salem, New Hampshire. Come on down.
And it sounds like Melvin Taylor says you got to go home. So go home already.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.